Welcome to the Room of Lives. I'm your host, Neil. It's been more than a year since I last posted an episode. Many things have happened in my life in this year. I moved from USA to Brazil, where I'm now doing a postdoc researching psychedelics. Okay, so today's episode is a conversation that happened kind of randomly when I went to the American Psychological Association's annual meeting for my first and only time in 2023. The APA meeting had an app, and I saw someone post that there would be a meeting of people interested in BDSM and kink in a neighboring hotel rooftop. I was curious and I went, and in that gathering, I heard a woman say something that I no longer remember today, but I found it very interesting at that time. This woman was Dr. Anna Randall. I talked with her for a bit, and we arranged to have a podcast conversation the next day in a corner of the elevator hallway of a hotel. Dr. Randall earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts and then a Master of Social Work from Boston University, and a Master of Public Health and Doctor of Human Sexuality from the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality. She's currently a sex therapist in the Silicon Valley area and also serves as the co-founder and executive director of the Alternative Sexualities Health Research Alliance. In this conversation, Anna began by sharing her childhood erotic fascinations and the pervasive role of shame in her Catholic upbringing. She then relates her work experience at the Public Defender's Office, interviewing imprisoned sex offenders. Then she shares a deeply candid account of her own psychiatric hospitalization in her 30s and the vital lessons she learned there. We trace her unique history of navigating 27 different therapists, beginning with a psychoanalyst who fell asleep during sessions, and how these encounters have informed her current approach as a directive sex therapist. Finally, we discuss her clinical work treating desire discrepancies in multicultural couples and how watching Indian matchmaking has helped her decode their intricate dynamics.
Let's begin with like a little bit of an introduction to, who you are and what you do.
A little bit of who I am and what I do. So I am Anna Randall. Who am I? I am it's interesting. Who am I? I'm a lot of things. It's interesting. The first word that thought to my mind is I'm an artist. And it's interesting. So much of my life, I struggle with what it is to be an artist. And I realized many years ago that an artist is many things. They're creative, right? So I'm creative as a therapist. I'm a creative. I'm a visual artist. I've many times been a visual artist. I'm also, for many, many years, I was a singer. I was an actor.
Oh.
I was a florist. I was a potter. I painted. I did so many things that were creative. Many of them didn't make much money. I was a cook, a chef. And I never thought I was very smart.
Okay.
And it took a long time in my life for me to figure out that I was smart. And now I realize how smart I am.
Okay, so now you do realize that you're smart.
Yeah.
Okay.
It took a long time, though. And I think part of what helped me do that was when I finally got into graduate school at Boston University and I went to social work school, I started to realize how smart I was. But in social work school, back when I went to social work school, social work was still a very kind of mushy art.
Yeah.
You know? And then in my second year of social work school, I was invited to go into their public health program. And suddenly I got into this program that was like this combination of something that was very, social work is a wonderful, it's a wonderful field. But I was also at Boston University where the idea of making any money in the field, you took this kind of vow of poverty via social,
Yeah.
right? And once I got into public health, the whole world opened up for me. And I took epidemiology, and suddenly epidemiology was like fascinating to me, right? The idea of like discovering why health problems happened, why, discovering, looking at studies and kind of discovering that I was so curious. And I'd been curious my entire life. But in my family, the idea that women could be smart or curious was not something really encouraged. Right?
You didn't grow up with that framework.
No, I didn't. I grew up in a framework where, going to college was something you went to get your MRS.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I grew up in a family where it was like, you really were supposed to be subservient. You were supposed to be a good girl.
Yeah.
Right? I was a Catholic girl growing up. There wasn't much emphasis. I was supposed to, I was interested in being an actor. I wanted to be an actor my whole life. And the idea was get your teaching certificate, be an English major. And so you could teach, you could teach theater and English. Right. So then even when I went to social work school, my family was like, oh, you're going to do therapy? Oh, what are you saying about us?
What does that mean? You're going to go, you were going to go see a therapist?
No, I was going to become somebody who was going to talk to people about personal lives.
Okay.
Right? And
about what you're going to say about
our family.
Well,
right?
Why would you be talking about your family?
Because I was in therapy at the time.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And what had precluded that was, or what had preceded that was that I had started my own therapy.
Yeah.
And what had made me kind of go to graduate school or become a therapist was I had entered my own therapy.
Yeah.
And I was living in New York in my early 20s and started to see a therapist, and my parents just flipped because it was suddenly like, what are you going to say about us?
Oh, man. Okay.
Right? And so
that's a little telling.
Yeah, it really scared them.
Yeah.
Right? And then me becoming a therapist was like, they didn't even ask me about it.
Yeah. Right. So let's back up a little bit and start with the story that you shared on the rooftop.
Uh-huh.
What was happening in your life when you were 5 years old?
I was a little girl who would, at very, I'll start even earlier than that story I told you, and I'll go to that story. I had a book when I was a child. This book was about dance.
Dance.
It was about dance.
Okay.
And in the book was a picture of a painting.
Okay.
And it was called The Dance of Death.
Okay.
And as I remember it, it was I believe it was a 15th century painting, very macabre painting, kind of Hieronymus Bosch sort of painting.
Yeah.
Of a very, very macabre sort of painting. And I was fascinated with this painting. So this incredible book was absolutely fascinating to me as a little, very, very little girl. And I would be mesmerized. I can still smell the book to this day. So I felt very strange that I was fascinated with this book, and I felt really like there was something creepy about it, but I was fascinated by it. And so I felt really ashamed that I liked this book, because the book was, these bodies were like writhing, and the bodies were quite naked, and there was very like macabre things in the book, and there was like blood and people being torn up, and so that was the first thing that I remember that was really kind of twisted. And as I said, I was a Catholic girl, and I was like very young, wondering why I was like watching these things. And then in the basement of the house was a television set, and I would go down in the basement very early in the morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would watch old reruns of this Buck Rogers television show. And I would watch these. So this show was made very, very early. It was like made in like started in 1930s. And in the 1930s, before the 1935 act that was a censorship act, the movies, the TV shows, and at that time they were shorts. There was a lot of nudity, and so in this there would be all of these actors that would be quite unclothed, doing very, very erotic things, and I would watch them in total fascination, and I would go into these kind of ecstatic states as a child watching these things, and I felt so like turned on, and I felt so wrong that I should be doing this, right? And I knew that I should hide it. And I didn't, I would just go down there and watch these for hours on end, And that
It's not like a tape that you're
no,
found. It's just a
like the
TV
show would be on,
right?
right? And it would go on for, I don't know, I think they play it for like an hour or so, but I'd go down every Saturday morning and watch these things, right? And that started a whole kind of erotic fascination that I had at a very young age. I would take this, we had a dictionary. It's kind of a colored dictionary, and I would underline all the dirty things in the dictionary with colored pencils, as if I didn't think my parents would find this, right? I would draw pictures of really, I would draw pictures of people being strung up, and their breasts tied up, and they would be like boiled in oil, or they'd be strung up over a fire, right? And I remember drawing a cartoon like that, and I signed it. Why in the world would I sign this thing? I would sign it, right? Yeah. And I remember my mother finding it. Wow. And she was
That's why you signed it.
Probably, right? And she confronted me with it, and I told her it was somebody else in school whose name was Anne, which is like, my name is Anna, and she signed it with Anne. I have no idea what I would do, why I did that, but just to try and cover, right? I was the guilty kid with the candy is saying, I didn't take this, right? And so this set up this like incredible guilt that I had about all of this. And there were so many things that I was doing at that time, and I had no idea why I did it. And
what was her reaction, let's say, when she found that drawing that you had made?
Well, as I remember, it was kind of like, she would ask me about it, and then I would deny it, and then she would kind of give up.
Yeah.
It was more like she would kind of try and shame me about it, and the effect would be that I would feel tremendous shame, but it's not like she would punish me. Okay. It was more like, my mother was really good at punishing for shame. She didn't need to do much more, because I was so shame influenced that it did its job.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, shame is such a powerful tool.
Yeah, was shame a powerful tool in general in your family?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Shame was a very powerful tool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whether it was my mother or my father. Yeah. I mean, no one needed to really hit. My mother later in my life got really good at hitting me in the face. She got really good at slapping me, backhanding me for like I had a smart mouth later in life. But they didn't beat, they didn't like slap or punch or spank. They just slap. My mother slapped. I remember my father once as a kid spanking me with a belt once in my life. But shame was the bigger one.
Yeah.
Words that's the thing that they would use, And I learned really early that, the best thing to do was just cower. The best thing to do was be small,
Yeah. Just
and
kind of hide yourself.
Mhm. 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 And it's still the thing that I struggle with it at times. Self-esteem was just so damaged. It's interesting. Just yesterday, I was listening to one of the addresses that somebody was giving at this conference that I'm at, and they were talking about this idea of like, if you can you trust yourself to believe you can do something, right? And I still struggle with it. And now, about 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And one of the things that I've really learned is that I had ADHD as a child. I've had it all my life, but women don't get diagnosed with ADHD often until they're much later in life. Because if you're smart and you're cute and you're compliant, no one catches it because you figure out workarounds, right? So I grew up, my ADHD had me feeling that I was, not very smart, all of those things, because instead what I saw myself as was a little bit flighty, and I wasn't good at math, and my attention to detail was poor. So I was always an A minus B plus student because I didn't have the attention to detail because of my ADHD.
Yeah.
Right? So I was slightly forgetful, and I would miss, I'd do a lot of typos, and I would have those little things that would keep me from being the A plus or A student. Right? Now, and that took a horrible hit to my self-esteem. Growing up.
Yeah. I mean, particularly in an educational system where it emphasizes a certain kind of learning and a certain kind of evaluation, where, I grew up in India, where we still have kind of a hangover from the colonial education system, which is very much like a rule-based education system. In fact, I think that education system is a little bit scared of letting kids free. A lot of it is about discipline, and it's about, here are the rules, you learn the rules, and you memorize the content, and you regurgitate.
Right.
And I kind of like hated all that. I personally was a trouble child. I always used to make trouble because I was also like hyperactive. I have never been formally diagnosed with ADD, but one of my ex-girlfriends who was a therapist said, I think you probably are ADD and you had ADHD when you were a kid and the hyperactivity went away. But definitely I was not a not a model child in school.
Yeah.
But a lot of those people are the ones who kind of go on and do like really interesting stuff later on. Once they're outside the bounds of these expectations and all the kind of mental check boxes that society and parents and school puts on them, that's when when they're outside that, that's when they're able to kind of shine more because they don't have to check these like specific boxes, which I think our educational system, I don't know what it has to do in order to properly train and evaluate kids like that, but some kind of, it's definitely harder to have a proper evaluation of a child who's talented and smart, but can't, I was like easily bored by stuff.
Yeah, and then for me, it was like my mind moves so fast that I was the kid in class who was always like one step ahead of people, and I was the kid who was always raising their hand. I was the kid who was always going, why?
Yeah.
Right? But I was, charming and cute and stuff like that. So I was never annoying, right? But I was always a bit impetuous and a bit, I wouldn't say I was the teacher's pet, but I was always the one who wanted to help and wanted to do things and stuff like that. So I was all, but I wasn't, but I never thought enough of myself to really be the teacher's pet, right? So I was always apologetic and always wanting to, make people happy.
Yeah.
Right. So I was incredibly self-effacing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it really got in the way of me really achieving what I always wanted to achieve because I was often very scattered.
Yeah.
Right. And I would move from thing to thing to thing.
Yeah.
Right. So my focusing in on one thing, like wanting to be an actor, helped me kind of achieve a lot in that arena. Right. But it also denied me from learning a lot of other things that I probably could have excelled at. And because my family wasn't that interested in education, right, I didn't see all the other possibilities of things that I could be or do.
Yeah.
So I come to where I am today, having missed a lot of what I could have been.
Yeah.
Right. I realize now I absolutely could have been a scientist in a way, or other things that I am now late to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I didn't have a family that saw that and encouraged me to get help to learn it. Like I still count on my fingers. I still, when it comes to math, I still can't multiply. Right. I still struggle to multiply.
Yeah.
Right. I used to think for many years that I just missed the period of school where I learned multiplication. I recognize now I'm number dyslexic.
Oh, okay.
Right.
It's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
and is dyscalculia, and so it's just fascinating, all the things. And you're right. I think, I do so much work. My work as a therapist now, my practice is so filled with, I work in Silicon Valley. I am a sex therapist, but so many of the people that I work with are men, often who have ADHD, often are undiagnosed, are many of whom are non-native to America, and I work so much with them on either helping them get diagnosed, right, with it, and I have such amazing compassion for them because so often they have just been struggling to kind of focus in their lives, right? And I love working with men. I love working with the struggles that they have around kind of finding focus, being able to attend to things, right? They come to me because, often they've had lives where they've been so focused on their education, or their culture has really focused them on their education. They've never had some of the early experiences of dating and interacting with whoever they're what their sexual orientation is, right? And then they're coming to me with like really deficits in communication skills, dating skills,
Are
life
a lot
skills.
of these Asian men?
A lot of the men I work with are, not all of them, but a lot of them are, either Southeast Asian or Asian men. And I've learned so much about Indian men in particular, and Indian couples. I work a lot with Indian couples as well, and have such an appreciation for the culture, and really have learned tremendously about the culture.
Yeah.
On how little sex education Indians get.
Oh my God! Yeah, there's like a huge taboo about it.
Oh my God,
Huge
it's
taboo.
stunning to me.
It's like intergenerational, like
Yeah.
craziness.
It's actually interesting. I have a friend on the East Coast who's a sex therapist, and she is Indian. And she told me a story that was it always has stuck with me. She's from Gujarat, and she told me that when she works with women who are from Gujarat, she has said they have told her that they come to her and they only want to do therapy in English because there is not one word in dialect that has anything to do with sex that is not vulgar. So therefore, they do not want to do therapy in dialect because of that.
Yeah.
Because all of the words are so disgusting.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me forever.
Yeah.
that what is it like to have every word
Yeah.
having to do with your body,
Yeah.
about the behaviors.
Yeah.
And so I have like such deep appreciation of how much that colors your life.
Yeah.
So when I work with people, like the whole idea of shame again, right? When people come to me from here in the States, I'll say, I will say, our puritanical, underpinnings here in the States, it just have never left us, right? And so none of us learn anything about how to have sexual health conversations, how to have conversations about our likes and our dislikes. Women in the United States are so socialized to not know anything about our desires and our interests. It's always about, women who are heterosexual. It's about, and even women who are same-sex oriented. It's about, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's not about, what do I want? It's about what pleases you. So only until they're maybe in their late 30s and 40s do women start to go, what do I want?
Yeah.
So in that, you just set up this incredible sense of even shame about, what do I want? Let alone that you have partners who shame you, and then we have the acculturation that happens for men, that happens about like that they're all so focused on, giving women orgasms, right? Their prowess is based on how many orgasms I gave you.
Yeah.
When often women, they're not that interested in whether or not I gave you an orgasm or that I got an orgasm, right? They can achieve a lot of pleasure without an orgasm, but that's foreign to so many men.
It's like a checkbox, like, woo, I got the.
And for a lot of women, it's like they can have incredible pleasure without. But for men, because they get so orgasm focused,
Yeah.
right? For a lot of reasons, and I understand for men, orgasms feel incredible. I mean, I don't know what it feels like because I don't have a male body.
Yeah.
Right. And so much of the work is like expanding that idea.
Yeah. 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 So going back to, so when you were a child, you kind of realized that you had some particular like sexual or erotic interest that you yourself kind of understood, like this kind of weird in my cultural context, and there's some shame surrounding it. So what happened? What was the evolution of that later on?
I buried a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right. And there were things that I was doing to myself. Things that were so shameful to me. And I thought that I was possessed by the devil.
Oh, yeah.
I really did. I started to feel like there was something so wrong with me that it was like the succubus and the incubus in Catholicism. There's this belief that there is this, a possession by a demonic creature.
Yeah.
That was, in the middle of the night, this, the succubus would come and this kind of female demonic creature that would, suddenly inhabit you, and you would go and be, kind of go and attack other people, and I felt like that was what the sort of thing was, that I was going to be, become this incredibly erotic creature that would be evil, right? And so I really did believe that I would not be able to control it. And so it was very interesting for me as a young girl, and in my teens, I was going to be the girl that was never going to have sex till she was married, and all of that sort of thing. And yet I was dating in my teen years, and, doing everything but, and I remember that it was like, I recognized that I had power, but I didn't want to use it for evil reasons. Right. So I had a boyfriend all through through high school. And the idea of like going all the way was like, I can't let that cat out of the bag. Right. I can't. Right. And and the boyfriend that I had all through high school dumped me like the month before I went away to college. And I was convinced it was because I wouldn't have sex.
And did you explain to him any of the background?
No. I couldn't tell him any of this. I couldn't tell him any because I felt so much shame.
So you were carrying around a lot of this like
Absolutely.
throughout your early life?
Yeah.
No confidants.
No.
Wow.
And underneath all of this was this, there were so many secrets in my family. And my mother had had a, nervous breakdown, in quotes, when I was 14. My mother had disappeared to a mental hospital when I was 14 and never knew why. So I also carried with me this idea that the men in the little white coats were going to come to get me.
Okay.
So between that and this idea that I had this secret, I didn't know whether I was going to have the men in the little white coats were going to come get me.
Yeah.
So I felt crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I was carrying around this incredible sense of like I was walking on a tightrope.
Yeah.
And so when I went off to college, after this boyfriend had dumped me,
Yeah.
I went off to college and I sunk into a deep, deep, deep depression. Went off to college to be an actor and struggled, really struggled. And met my boyfriend in college and then started having sex. And we had this wonderful experience. I still couldn't tell him any of this. But I had this really amazing experience with him. And I remember now, like, when I look back on that, it was an incredibly freeing experience.
Yeah.
But I was still covering all of this. Right? And so, it's really interesting because when I got out of college and I moved to New York City to be an actor, I got involved with a guy, and I entered into a dominant submissive relationship with this very exotic Greek guy that was very illicit. He lived with somebody else. I got into this kind of period of time where I was living this very double life.
Yeah.
Of like dating this guy who would come over in the middle of the night. I would dress up in the middle of the night. You'd have this very kind of dominant, submissive sort of relationship. And there I was kind of in this kinky scene. We had no name for it. I didn't know there was such a thing as kink. I didn't know there was such a thing as a dominant, submissive relationship, but I was living in New York City, working on Wall Street, at the same time auditioning for parts. And I look back at it now and go, oh my God, like, it's funny. I meet people now. In fact, there's a good friend of mine who was living in New York City at the same time. And he always will say things like, gee, I wish I would knew you back in New York, back in those days, and it's so fascinating to me. Like I fell into that in my early 20s with no name to it.
Yeah.
It took me another 20 years to realize that I gave it a name, and I got involved with somebody who was a married man, and there was a period of time where I actually thought about becoming like a professional, like a professional mistress.
Is that the same professional mistress? Well, I was in my head thinking about a dominatrix, but that's different.
No, I really thought about like becoming not an escort, but like I thought about like, oh, I'll become somebody who, someone takes out, like an escort who is taken out to the opera and all this. And I kept thinking, well, if I do that, maybe I'll have sex with him, or maybe I won't have sex. And it was this idea of like, I can have some more power in all of this.
Yeah.
Right. But there was always this sense of shame. Like there was always this sense of like this idea, like I'll never really have holidays with somebody. I'll never really be the girlfriend of somebody. Right. I'll have to
because you don't want to open up about these deeper things. Like, what was the difference that you could allow yourself to be like this mistress person, but not?
I think it was I think it was that I kind of wanted power back. Like, I wanted to be able to, the idea of like getting married and settling down with somebody meant I would become subservient and I would lose power. And it wasn't power in a like power over, it was like autonomy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having grown up with a
Yeah.
very authoritarian father, with a mother who was very much under his thumb, who was very much a victim, and who wielded power through this very victim place.
Yeah.
And it was really unpleasant for me growing up like that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to experience that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that sex felt like the only place I could get power. I didn't want to use it badly. I wanted to do it in a much more, it felt like I could do this in a way that felt like if I could do this in a kind of structured way,
Yeah.
I could have my power back.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It kind of, yeah.
Like I never wanted to do it in a way that was bad. I wanted to do it in a way that felt more upfront.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what that would mean. Maybe do you have an idea of what?
Bad?
Yeah, you're like, oh, I don't
Well,
want to have sex in a
It's
way
like
that's bad. What
it's like
does that
well, it's
mean?
like it's like the girls that you knew in high school or college that would use sex as a way to have power over people.
Okay.
You know?
To like manipulate them in
Yeah,
different
to
ways.
manipulate. I
Yeah.
never wanted to do that. I never wanted to do that. I wanted to have it on an equal level. I wanted to be upfront about it.
Yeah.
I never saw why people would use sex to manipulate somebody.
Yeah. You didn't want to control anyone.
No.
But you didn't want to be controlled either. You wanted your own
I wanted it
autonomy,
to be something
your
we
own-
can talk about and
Yeah.
negotiate. Right? I never, and I think that's probably, it's interesting. I'm not thinking about it. Like, I think that's where my kind of sense of sex positivity came from. Like, I couldn't understand why sex became this, I had dealt with so much shame in my life about sex. It was like, why do we have to have sex be so shameful?
Yeah.
And I was trying to struggle with trying to unhook that shame from it. I was like, why can't we talk about it? Why can't we turn it into something that is like something we can negotiate about, with something we can make up front?
Yeah. Yeah. As an Indian male who is the product of many, many different generations of this kind of like suppressed, shamed sex culture, I don't know either why we can't just, I really don't know what the problem is.
And it's interesting. So there's a theory in sexology that's called the dual control model. And it has to do with like high arousing and low arousing, high inhibition and low inhibition. Right. And I am a high arouser. I've always been a high arouser. Right. But I've always had high inhibition. Right. And I wanted to lower my inhibition. Right. But I would often go from having periods of a high arousal and high inhibition to low inhibition.
Yeah.
Right. But I would sometimes partner with people who were high arousers with low inhibition.
Yeah.
Right. And with that, it would often be kind of like I'd feel kind of out of control. Right. Because their low inhibition with my inhibition would bring down my inhibition, right?
Yeah.
And then I would feel like, oh my God, I'm like on a train going off the track, right? Then I would partner with somebody with high inhibition,
Yeah.
right? And what would often happen is we'd end up with a sexless relationship, right?
Yeah.
Because what would happen is it would squash me,
Yeah.
right? So I was always looking for like someplace to be in the middle where I would have like an ability to be a high arouser and not have it get squashed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I think that's always been what I've been looking for, is this place where it's in the middle, right? So I can still be a high arouser and not have it squashed, right? And it's something I see in my practice all the time too. And women who are high arousers have historically been like, it's like not okay to be a high arouser.
Yeah. That's the culture.
Yeah, as a culture. It's interesting. I was watching something this morning, where they were talking about up until the early 19th century, women were seen as the ones who were the high arousers. Men were the ones who wanted the stability in the family. Women were looked as the high sex drive people.
That's so interesting how something that we believe is so monolithic today is like, oh yeah, the men are the ones who
It wasn't like that before.
that it just culture around that just changes from
Yeah.
one era to another.
Exactly. So, yeah. So for me, that just
And I bet that was similar in India. Like, we talk about, so what happens nowadays in India is that like public display of affection or like, or sex or romantic contact or anything like this, a lot of the more traditional people in India are like, these are Western influences that are corrupting our traditional values. But that does not, it's not consistent with what we know about some of our like ancient literature where like, we
temple
wrote the Kama
goddesses.
Sutra and there are explicit references to sex in the core of our religions. People go inside temples, like Shiva temples, and basically the thing that they worship is this sculpture of the ground, and it's called a Shivling. It means like the phallus of the god, and it has the shape of
the lingam
coming out of it through going through our vagina.
Yep.
And so these are the same people who, if you go and tell them, hey, did you know what that was? That was a dick going through a vagina. They'll be like, I'm gonna set you on fire. I'm like, what is this huge cognitive? So it doesn't square. So that means that there was a time in India's past that sex was like completely okay, or there wasn't this suppression around it, and in fact it was a central idea within religion. And you can find these ideas like the world is seen as something that is given birth to by the female and the male forces that were whatever, and that's why it's in the middle of temples, like that's the force of creation. But somehow our ideas changed about it, and I wonder how much of it had to do with colonization.
Everything to do with colonization.
And then we adapted those ideas and somehow started believing maybe that's what India is about. And then these influences are now corruptions from the West, which may have been our original ideas to begin with before it got suppressed by. It's so weird.
It's happened all over the world. You look at Hawaii, you look at the stories in Hawaii about the volcanoes. The volcanoes and the stories of what happened in Hawaii when the Westerners came to Hawaii. You look at the stories in the South America. There are stories there. You look at them in Oceania, in the Western, in the Eastern, in the Pacific. There are stories everywhere about these. When I studied for my doctorate in sexology, the stories are everywhere. Yeah. Of exactly these. The creation stories are always sexual, and they're deeply embedded in cultures everywhere in the world, and the westernization, the colonization of these cultures destroyed these everywhere. Yeah. And the idea of shame and sexual shame is pervasive.
Yeah, a funny little anecdote is one time I went with my parents to Bhutan, which is this tiny country in the, we share a border. India shares a border with Bhutan, and Bhutan is up in the mountains, and it's completely Buddhist nation. And until recently, it was a monarchy. It still kind of is a monarchy, but the king has been trying to introduce democracy. So he has kind of like a panel now, some sort of an election process. But Bhutan has been shielded from the rest of the world until recently, and only now is starting to kind of open up its borders more to tourists and so when I went, I noticed that it was definitely culturally very unique in ways that I had like no idea. So this sexual imagery is rampant in Bhutan, but it's seen as some kind of a religious imagery. So there are dicks everywhere. It's kind of crazy. So I went with my parents, right? And I'm like this Indian kid, went with my Indian parents. And I remember the first time that I noticed we were inside this restaurant. I mean, having lunch, and we are at this table, and behind us on the wall, there's a framed painting of what can only be a dick with hairy balls. A painting of it. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And nobody's talking about it. Of course, we're just eating our food. But I took the opportunity to take a picture of my parents with that thing in the background. I'm like, this is real weird. I need to get a picture of this. And then as we were walking around, I noticed that on houses, there are these beautiful ornate paintings of these huge dicks with eyes at the head of the dick. There would be eyes, and it's just spitting out cum. And then there's all this ornamental decorations around it. I'm like, man, these are like houses with beautiful dicks painted on them. And we would go to this street where the government has set up these little shops where you can buy like little handicraft and cottage industry stuff. And a lot of them were just dicks.
Yeah.
So they're like this little wooden keychains, and they're all like dicks and whatever. So I remember I had an Indian girlfriend who was in the US at that time, and I was taking pictures and sending them to her. I'm like, oh, can you believe this? This is crazy. What is going on? And I remember one time I was just standing at the balcony of our hotel, and I watched this car go by, and the rear windshield of the car was dirty, and someone had drawn a dick on it. And I'm like, that's common in the West too. But here, I don't know if that was meant as a prank, or it was like, I'm just going to draw this beautiful dick on my car. So, and then we went into some monasteries, and there were these ancient paintings in the monasteries, and a lot of them were quite erotic. Like they were paintings of, I don't know, maybe people in different stages of enlightenment sitting and meditating while having sex with this other female. So paintings of half male, half female. So within the center of a lot of their religious imagery was sex, like very visibly. So I was quite interested. I was like, I think what is happening is that the sexual imagery that kind of got censored in India, because Hinduism and Buddhism are all kind of interrelated, that got censored in India, perhaps because of our colonial history, didn't quite get censored in Bhutan. And so they still, it's still kind of out in the open. And us who are coming from the rest of the world are feeling like, what the hell is all this?
Yeah.
But they don't have any problems with it. Like, okay, yeah, that's just how it is. And sex is kind of like a central pillar of our religion. So
It's so interesting because, even in Catholicism, you look at Saint Teresa of Avila, who found that for her, ecstatic states came from these meditative states that she used, which were basically masturbation, periods of masturbation. And she wrote extensively about these ecstatic states that she would get into.
Yeah.
Right. And so, ecstatic states in this, being closer to God exist in many, many religious experiences where whether it's with another person or solo.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, I really truly believe that these conscious states, and even in kink, people will talk about it. Lee Harrington has written about it in her book about spirituality and kink, Radical Ecstasy, written by Dossie Easton, where she talks about it as well. I mean, people have often used these altered states of consciousness, whether, often when people talk about using ecstasy, they'll talk about it as well. People often use these ecstatic states to find a place where they connect with a higher consciousness, right? And so sexuality is really used by people as a way of finding some place to catch and capture another part of themselves or a part of something outside themselves. Right. And so I often wonder why we're so afraid of that, even in Judaism. There's so many experiences like that as well. Sufism, and so I'm often so puzzled by why we find it so hard to accept that.
Yeah.
And so for me, my own journey has just been this constant in and out of trying to find a place for sexuality to be really like with this self-acceptance about that for me.
Yeah. So going back to your story, you were in college and you were in New York City and you were living kind of a double life. And then from there, you were sharing how you went into grad school and you had to work with sex offenders. I don't know if something happened in it.
Yeah. Well, I've lived so many places and so many lives. I eventually left New York City. I met someone and met my ex-husband, and we moved to Boston. And in Boston, well, we met in New York City. I moved to Kansas City because of a job he had. I started working for Planned Parenthood. And I think that's when I really started to kind of connect with sexuality in a way that changed my life in a lot of ways. Working at Planned Parenthood was a really wonderful experience, but that's part of what made me both decide to work in women's health, work in sexuality, become a therapist.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we eventually moved to Boston, that's when I went to grad school and went in as a social worker. And that's where that connection of social work and public health. And then when my first placement was working at the public defender's office. And the guy that I was my supervisor, I got all of the sex offenders. He was really burned out, and he gave me all the sex offenders. And so I started working with the sex offenders, and it really put me at a crosshairs with the school, because the school didn't look well. At least the people that I was supervised by at the school didn't take well to the fact that I saw the sex offenders as people. I didn't just see them as men who had hurt women. I saw them as people who...
Yeah, you empathize with them somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, I empathize with them as people who had a reason for why they had done what they had done, and mostly looked at them as people who'd been horribly traumatized themselves. And I was really taken to task by people at the school.
What was your job at that time? Like what
I was interviewing people who needed to have what's called disposition planning, where my job was to interview them to figure out what to do with them, whether or not they needed to be, whether there was some sort of other plan for them than to go to prison. So sometimes it was interviewing them in prison to say whether or not to write a plan for them as to whether or not they needed to be, whether they could be released from prison. Right? Like sometimes they've been in prison, and part of my job was to say to the court whether they should be released. Right? They've done some time. Sometimes it was a young person who'd been picked up for something, and
I think it's this elevator.
Is it?
For the law, thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was to tell the court whether or not this young person who'd been picked up for some offense, whether or not I was saying, really this person needs rehab or something like that.
Yeah. So you were interviewing them.
Yeah, I was interviewing them.
Wow. So you were getting some kind of like first person account of.
Oh, absolutely.
Things
I was
like,
right
from their.
So I would, interview a 55-year-old man who had been picked up for something going on with a 15-year-old stepdaughter.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Or I interviewed a serial rapist in a maximum security prison for the criminally insane. That was a creepy experience. Um, and I was, finding some of the humanity in these people. Right. And I was really taken to task by people about it.
Yeah.
You know.
Because you made your perspective kind of known that we.
Yeah, I
some
mean, I
extent you
would
were
I would
messing with them.
give a sympathetic
Mm.
story as to why this person was doing what they were doing,
Yeah.
right? And that wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And I think that really set the stage for me in my life around working with people who have challenges with looking at sexuality from a lens that a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't work with right now, I don't work with offenders, but I often work with people who have had challenges with sexual behaviors that are not in the general kind of idea of what is kind of normal or standard, right? I don't like that word normal, but are definitely things that people don't understand.
Yeah.
Right. What people do when it's illegal are still illegal, right? But there are a lot of things that people do that people don't understand,
Yeah.
right? And I think it shaped a lot of me as far as being more open to hearing what people do.
Yeah.
It also helped me understand more about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, where were you going to grad school again?
Boston University.
And they gave you trouble. Like, what kind of trouble?
Well, I remember being called into the dean's office and I had written a paper on one of the people I was seeing I had to write a paper for one of my classes, and she just read me the riot act about how could I see how could I have any sympathy for this guy who had done something with his 15-year-old stepdaughter, and who he had said that his 15-year-old stepdaughter was very flirtatious and had really come on to him. And she said, that's impossible. A 15-year-old girl can't do that. And this guy was a very passive guy, very unable in his own life to make much decisions. And this young woman, I believe, had probably had been molested by other people.
Yeah.
And I kind of believe that he probably had been coerced into this. But I also believe that he did have the role as as an adult to be more have better boundaries and be able to say no.
Yeah.
But I kind of probably do believe that she had come on to him, right? But I don't believe this had been her first incident with somebody molesting her.
Yeah.
And I had written the idea that I don't think that being in jail was a good option for him. I think that intensive therapy was a much better option for him. Given who he was and his age and his health conditions, I really didn't think that
And probably the 15-year-old stepdaughter would have benefited from something being shot.
Oh my God, absolutely. But I really didn't think that a hard prison sentence was was the best option for him. And she really thought that he was a hardcore abuser, and I didn't believe that at all. I thought he was a very sad character who really was caught up in something that was way bigger than him. And she was not happy with me at all, and felt that I was on the wrong path. And it was a really hard situation. She pretty much threatened me with flunking me, for what I was doing, and told me I was completely off base.
Yeah.
And it was really scary for me.
Yeah.
Because it really shook me about, really, am I that off about what I'm doing? And I don't think I was. But, I still struggle at times with people who have very rigid beliefs about sex and what is right and what is wrong. And I don't believe that it's that clear all the time. I really don't. And I still struggle with that, with very rigid believers about sexuality. I still struggle with that around the areas of sex addiction. people who believe that there is this concept that, people can be sex addicts. I still don't believe that that's overwhelmingly true at all. I think
So what is your perspective on it? Because at this conference, I saw a booth. Did you see that booth? There was
Oh, yeah, I
a
talked to
booth
them a few
around,
years ago. Yeah.
sex addiction.
Yeah.
Like we can help you with your sex addiction.
I believe that people who are who have what they call sex addiction, it's something else. That if somebody truly has what they think is sex addiction, it's OCD, it's bipolar disorder, and somebody's in a manic phase. I do believe people can get compulsive about it, but I don't think it's an addiction.
Yeah.
Right? I think that it's something
is it different from an addiction that you're
because an addiction has a one component that makes it strikingly different, which is if somebody is addicted to something, they have withdrawal.
Yeah.
People who are addicted to sex, or that what they say, don't have withdrawal. They don't have a physical withdrawal. They feel crappy. They don't like it. They feel bad, but they don't have physical withdrawal. And I think that is technically, when you look at what the technical definition of addiction is, that is what is fundamental to an addiction. I think they can feel compulsive, similarly to what happens when people stop watching, going social media, and they have to stop watching their phones. They actually, it's not an addiction. It's a compulsion. It's something they feel really drawn to, but they don't get sick. They don't throw up. They don't go through the physical withdrawal, right? So I think it's a big misnomer, and it has people believe that if they start again, they'll never be able to stop, right? And I do believe when people have a physical, chemical addiction to drugs and alcohol, there is there's biological component to it. Don't believe that that's the case. And I think you end up, when you label somebody with that sex addiction thing, you burden them with a long-standing, lifelong belief that they cannot be in control. Yeah. People who are believe they're sex addicts, really end up feeling this like incredible fear and lack of control over a biological function that we all deal with. Yeah. It's like sex is part of life. Mm-hmm. So I often will work with people who've been in something like sex addicts, the sex addiction, SAA or SLAA, the sex and love addiction, after they've been in the program for a couple of years. And I think that the fellowship, the going into a program like that where they meet other people, can be really helpful for folks, where they can get in a program where they meet people like them and stuff for a couple of years. But it creates a container, where somebody can go and feel like I have some support to stop, going to massage parlors and stuff. But after a couple of years, they're not going into the container and figuring out what's going on. So often what I find out is, they've never looked at why do they do this. Yeah. So they've gotten some control over not going, but they don't know why. Yeah. And so what I help them do is find out why. And what they'll find out is like, oh, I go to the massage parlor because, I have a fight, oh, gee, why do I go? Well, it seems like every time I have a fight with my boss on the way home, I go there. Oh, well, let's look at what's going on at home, or let's go what's going on at work. Yeah. Right? Right? Or let's talk about the fact that when your bipolar manic phase picks up, that's when you show up there. Yeah. Right? So let's treat your bipolar disorder, or let's treat your disruption at work, or let's treat your bad marriage, right? Yeah.
I'm reading this book currently called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, by a Canadian doctor called Gabor Mate.
Oh, Gabor Mate, yeah.
Gabor Mate. And his thing is with chemical addictions, mostly with the homeless population in Vancouver, in Canada. And his whole thing is that it's kind of similar how addictions have been like stigmatized, and you're like, oh, there's something like wrong with you. Why do you keep taking this thing? It should be easy. But his thing is like, when there is addiction, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. Because there's kind of pain that they're trying to get away from. And then there's like probably deep-rooted trauma.
I absolutely, totally agree with you. Yeah. The 1940s concept of the 1940s concept of drug and alcohol addiction was a step up from the moral belief before then. So before the 1940s, the idea was there was moral corruption.
Yeah.
So the idea you became a drug or alcohol addict because you were morally corrupt.
Yeah, very helpful.
Right. But in the 1940s, when you came up with this idea that that it was a sickness, right, was a step up.
Yeah.
Okay. I think now Gabor Mate and other people have been talking about this for years. The idea here that this is trauma based. There's two things: that it's trauma based, and that it is also a learned behavior. So if your family generationally handles trauma by drinking and drugging,
Yeah.
right? So if your dad and your mom deal with the fact that that fighting happens in the family, that all of these things that are bad go on in the family by drinking and drugging to avoid conflict, I think that concept is growing more and more. Now, the problem is we have a huge industry around drug and alcohol addiction. Yeah. Thank you, Patrick Carnes. That has become a huge industry. I mean, billions of dollar industry. And that is the challenge here, because that's not going to go away quietly. And so, and that's both an industry and religiously underpinned as well. That industry doesn't want to give up easily on that, right? But I do believe that people drink and drug because of trauma. No, when people, have had bad things happen in their lives, they've got to do something.
Yeah.
And when we don't have enough mental health providers, or we don't have enough people who believe that trauma is not just something to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't have enough mental health providers out there helping people manage trauma.
Yeah. So then let me ask you, when you're very young, like yourself, and you're finding out, oh, I have this kind of like weird erotic fantasies or interests or whatever, that's just like kind of weird. Do you think that also comes from some trauma, or it can just be natural and, it doesn't have to be the result of anything negative?
Welcome to the story and question of my own life. I ended up in my 30s, I ended up hospitalized. I ended up in
This was after grad school?
After grad school,
Yeah.
after years in a sexless marriage, after years of cutting, after years of depression. It came to a head, and I ended up so depressed and so dissociated and so just absolutely miserable that I ended up checking myself into a mental hospital. And in the hospital, I went in for a short visit and ended up there for 4 months. At the time, it was a time when that was possible. These days, I don't even know that would even be possible. I was in an incredible facility outside of Princeton, New Jersey. It was the best time of my life and the worst time of my life. That time in my life is worth a book. Being a social worker at the time gave me a perspective that was really unique. At the same time, I was there as a patient, so it was fascinating as a patient. I was released 3 times and came back within 24 hours because I would cut as soon as I left.
Wow. Did that.
We kept looking at what the trauma was. I have real reason to believe that there was probably some sort of trauma that happened very early in my life.
Very well.
Yeah, I think that's it. I had a therapist, a wonderful therapist, say to me, "We may never know the smoking penis." And
I'm sorry to laugh.
Isn't that great? It's such a great, isn't that a great line? And to this day, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I did.
When, it happens in a pre-verbal age.
Yeah. I really do think it was probably pre-verbal.
And not only pre-verbal is one of the reasons why I think it's like difficult to remember explicitly. And the other thing is that probably that experience was so traumatizing that there are all these natural ways that the mind comes and just tries to erase it.
Yeah.
Or like
It's so
its
somatic.
effect remains, but it's like, yeah, act like it didn't happen.
Right.
So we explicitly don't remember, but its effects remain in all of these ways, we
No,
behave and
I know so much, Neil. It's like there's so much that says that this is pre-verbal for me.
Yeah.
There's so much that says there's a somatic memory in this, right?
Yeah.
There's I've often thought about, like, do I do some, is there any way that I could recall this? Is there any, I have thought about psychedelics. I have thought about, like, a regression. I've really
like
hypnosis, like, and part of it is, like, I don't know which which angle to go, right? Because I have a deep curiosity about it and a deep wish to resolve it in some way,
Yeah.
right? When I was, back in the day when I was cutting, right? And cutting was very, very erotic for me. It was always paired with orgasm for me.
Yeah.
And even when I was in graduate school, I actually really wanted to do my dissertation on erotic cutting, like, and it's because there was always a pairing of that. And I've talked to other people who cutting has an erotic component to it for many people, right? And there is a deep desire for me to know more about that. And so it is fascinating around that desire to know more about that.
I know that ketamine therapy is useful in the cases where you want to revisit a moment of trauma, but normally you're unable to because it kind of dissociates you a little bit so that you don't identify with. But I think that's more for the case of where you know what the traumatic incident was. Like if you just don't know or cannot remember, then it's kind of difficult. I mean, I don't really know too much about hypnotherapy, but I heard a little bit during this conference about using hypnosis. Actually, the guy who gave the talk, Krippner or something, he was sitting at that cafe earlier, and he seems to be like a real veteran in all of this hypnosis stuff. I went to some of the weird hypnosis talks, and he was a character there, and he was talking about using hypnosis to like regress the person to a certain age, and then maybe, do they say that? Maybe they are able to remember or see things that they thought that they had forgotten or never known or something like that. So I'm very curious to know if there's a way that that incident of trauma still, the memory of it still stays within, but it's just like under a lot of layers and can be accessed, or maybe it cannot. I mean, when we are really young, we are not really storing memories in the way that adults are storing. And even happy or neutral memories can't quite be accessed explicitly, but not sure.
When you look at people like Levine and Vanderkolk, and they talk so much about trauma is stored in the body, right? And I do know that I do have somatic moments. I mean, I do have somatic flashbacks.
Oh, you do?
I do have somatic flashbacks.
What does that mean, somatic flashbacks?
I have body memory that'll happen, where I'll have something that'll occur and I will have my body will react in a certain way.
Yeah.
And that either there'll be a flashback that'll happen where it's a sense memory or a physical memory that has no, it doesn't have I don't have a visual memory about it, right? But it'll have something that will tell me there's some sort of physical sense that something occurs.
Are you okay with sharing a little bit more about this? Like, what kind of incident triggers this somatic?
It'll happen often during sex. It'll often happen during a kink scene, right? It took me a long time to be okay with sharing what goes on.
Yeah.
And it used to be very hard to share what was going on, because in those moments when it happens, that's what reinforces the idea that this is a pre-verbal experience, because there's so little there's so little visual memory with it that I can't explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? All I can tell you is that it's a sense of being very young. There's a sense of there's no actual story that goes with it, right?
Yeah.
All I can tell you is that it feels a flash of my body feeling very young, very frightened, often very oppressed, right? Um, uh, yeah, and that sensation lasts for a long time. It lasts for hours after.
Yeah. And it kind of shapes your behavior for the hours afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often very frightened for several hours afterwards,
Okay.
and and I've had moments of dissociation, and I was molested multiple times as a kid by people I babysat for the fathers of people I babysat for.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
This is in your verbal memory.
this is verbal. I mean, no, these I remember.
Yeah.
And
That's kind of interesting because, like you pointed out, if you are the victim of a molestation, it tends to happen again.
Yeah. And it's funny because those things were memories that I had and never thought of them as molestations. Like I grew up, the babysitter of somebody down the street that, the father of when I babysat, like kissed me in the car. I was 10 years old. Like I never thought of that until later in life. I was like, oh, like what was the father of somebody kissing me when I was 10 years old? Like, and telling me how pretty I was. Like, what the fuck was this guy doing, right? And then somebody else, when I was like 12, babysitting, he's, standing in the kitchen and he takes my hand and puts my hand on his crotch, and I'm like, and I remember in that situation, I was like up on the ceiling watching down, like very classic thing, right?
Oh, wait. What do you mean? In
Like
that moment that it actually happened,
I
you
remember
dissociated?
I dissociated and was up on the ceiling looking down at what was happening.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
classic dissociation.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
I mean, and these things at the time, like kind of didn't think of them as molestations, like later in life, because it wasn't like somebody actually like pulled their pants down, right? So I was like, well, that wasn't a molestation because he didn't actually have me touch his penis, right? But they were, right? Things like that, right? The boy down the neighborhood, played hide and go seek with me, and he's 5 years older than me and got on top of me, things like this. Like I didn't think that those things, but they were.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm very curious about is that suppose person A has an experience of being molested, and then these incidents recur in the future, but then the perpetrators, how did they know? Like,
I don't know.
There's something in the energetics of it that their psychology is kind of like a lot of these things I think are subconscious. I don't know. Maybe a person who has been molested carries themselves in a way that you can't really describe or whatever. There's something. And then there are certain other people. It's kind of like psychologists like fit like jigsaw puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
And although they can't explain or describe, this perpetrator comes and then there's some sense of like, oh, there's like loose boundaries here. And then there's whatever,
I think you're right, Neil. I mean, and it's funny. I was a very, I was pretty flirtatious I was this pretty little blonde girl that was like, my dad was a very gregarious guy, and he really kind of paraded me around as this like pretty little girl that he would take around with him. And I think I learned to be very much just a entertainer kind of girl.
Yeah.
And that might have been it, which then of course was shame for me. Like I was calling this upon myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think I was promiscuous acting. I think I was just super friendly and like, hi, how are you? Kind of girl.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right about the fact that there must be some way that people act that makes them, it's like that idea that it's like you're asking for it, right? And that people get this idea that if you're just a little too friendly,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of that whole paternalistic, sexist sort of way that women you can't be too much,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, it's a weird way of being, and I guess I'm just lucky that I mean, yeah, bad enough things happened to me, but I guess I'm lucky that I didn't end up in that one step farther that I was being raped again and again, right? I mean, it was bad enough what happened, but it didn't go any farther than that, right? But I still now recognize still the effects of that, what it was, right?
Yeah.
But it's still puzzling to me.
Yeah.
Right? And I think probably a lot of that is because I still don't know its etiology. I don't know the beginnings of that. And whether or not, I ever will, I don't know, but it did shape a lot of who I am, right? And it shaped part of me, my own journey, and wanting to be a sex therapist and wanting to help people not have to go through a lot of what I went through.
Yeah.
To get,
And I think this is what I was trying to say on the rooftop as you were saying this. I actually think it's kind of cool that you've done all of this to sort of break out of a kind of cycle. Like, well, there is the pattern or cycle regarding like sexuality. And then the other pattern is that of like this culture around shame that you kind of inherited from your parents. But rather than handing it down to the next generation, you've gone to therapy and you're now a therapist. And in fact, because of some of those experiences, negative experiences that you yourself had, you are more effective in understanding some of these perspectives and more effective as a therapist. So it's kind of like you can turn it around and say like, without some of those, I'm not saying that people should be undergoing negative experiences, but without those, you would not be able to do some of the work that you're doing today. So
I think so too. I think there's a third one too, which is mental health.
Yeah.
Having grown up in a family where my mother's struggles with mental health, which I didn't even know the level to which, my mother's own challenges with depression.
Yeah.
Which, knowing that my mother was hospitalized when I was 14 and disappeared one day.
Yeah.
Not knowing why.
Yeah.
And spending a long period of time in a mental hospital where I wasn't allowed to go in to see her and would stand in the parking lot and wave to her, right. And coming back out of the hospital and never talking about what happened, right? Knowing that my mother hated psychiatry afterwards, refused to go back to see a psychiatrist, even though my mother stayed depressed for many, many, many years after that, right? And only finding out close to when my father passed away that my mother had been hospitalized when I was 2 years old and no one had ever told us. Knowing that my brother suffered from depression later in life and that my father called me one day and said, that thing you have? Well, your brother has it too.
That thing?
That's what my father said. That thing you have?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, this really exacerbates the problem. It's like the kind of censoring. Something similar is true in my case also. My mom had depression. Some of it I knew, but I didn't know the extent to which she had different kinds of mental issues after she passed away. And then I learned that she had bipolar.
Oh.
And so in our family, there wasn't ever that much of an open conversation. I would say, boss. And I wonder, even though there wasn't such open conversation, there are ways in which you subliminally inherit a lot of your previous generation's mental stuff. Maybe not in the exact same form, but it leaves some kind of an imprint on you. And I wonder if my interest in psychology somehow subconsciously stems from all the unspoken energies that were happening.
Absolutely. So, it's like for me that those kind of those very struggles, for me right now in my life, I feel like it's all come together. Even acting is so much a part. There are so many therapists who were actors, right? And I think acting is a way for people to both learn how to learn the ways other people live their lives. I mean, acting is so much about inhabiting other ways of other beings, other people, right?
Yeah.
So my life as an actor, my life as a creative, my life as a therapist, my shame, my mental health things, all of those things come together now in this beautiful way that I actually kind of never thought they would.
Yeah.
Right? I'm able now
Yeah.
to feel like finally in my life,
Yeah.
I'm able to kind of put the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, and you don't have to alienate parts of yourself like you had to at one point on the past.
Yeah.
It forms a piece of the bigger puzzle.
And that's something that I always wanted. I always wanted to pull the threads together, and feel more whole
Yeah.
instead of fragmented,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is such a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's been a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So tell me a little bit more about your hospital stay in your 30s. You said that it was the worst and the best part of your life. But what happened during that hospital stay, and like how did it change your
Well,
perspective? Like, what did you do? Do you learn something about yourself, or?
yeah, I was in this very country club sort of hospital. It's called the Carrier Foundation. Still exists. It was in a semi-locked ward in a hospital that had like a locked ward, a semi-locked ward, and an open ward, more open ward. The semi-locked ward was for eating disorders, a dissociative unit, and I was in the dissociative unit, and some very seriously kind of depressed people who were there for ECT, for electroconvulsive therapy, which at the time was ECT now is a very different animal than it was then, which it's always been a very effective treatment for some people with very serious depression who are quite catatonic. So I was in this, in this dissociative unit of people who were individuals who, when they get very depressed, become quite dissociated, meaning they kind of lose track of reality. And at that time, my depression was so bad that I would cut and become very dissociated. I was cutting to the point that it's not that I wanted to die. It wasn't that I directly wanted to die, but I would cut to the point that I didn't really care how much I would cut. And I was afraid that I was going to do something that would like unintentionally kill myself.
Yeah.
And so I went into the unit, and they were trying to help me not dissociate. And so in the unit, I was doing a lot of different things in the unit. One thing, I learned how to be a potter when I was there, because they had an art program. And that's when I kind of discovered my creativity as an artist. I learned a lot about how to control the part of me that wanted to drift away. There was this part of me that just wanted to kind of disappear from life. I also learned a lot about the different aspects of myself that did a lot of parts work while I was there, about different aspects of myself, the little girl in me, the angry part of me, the parts of me that wanted to control my life, that were at odds with each other.
Yeah.
It was a period of time where I had really disconnected from my family. and was really struggling with parts of me that were very angry with my family over things that had happened throughout my life. The controlling nature of my father, my mother's victimness, and her anger at me. We had a very fractious relationship. And I created a lot of relationships. There were several people on the unit that had dissociative identity disorder. And the people on the unit got very mad at me because I kept creating relationships with particularly one person in the dissociative identity disorder program. And they would come out in new personalities to me. And the doctors didn't like that because I would kind of act like their therapist because I was trained, and they didn't like that at all. And I would play games with them, and they would come out like an 8-year-old who would play a board game with me. And I learned a lot about how deep my depression was, like how dark it was down there, how much self-loathing I really had, which I tried to cover for so long. I made a really stupid mistake while I was there one day. I was close to the end of my stay, and one day in the throes of some upset, I said some stupid things about wanting to hurt myself or kill myself. Uh-oh. You don't say things like that in a hospital. And as soon as I said it, I regretted it. And down the hall from the locked unit
came a straitjacket or something?
Close to that. Wow. They came down the hall. 2 big burly guys came down the hall from the locked unit. And then I tried to take back what I said.
Uh-oh.
And it didn't work. And they came down and they grabbed me and they put me in a 8-point or whatever. And they dragged me off to the locked unit. And I kept saying, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. And it didn't matter. So they took me down, and it was a 72-hour hold. And as they took me down the hall, I got down there, and as I walked in, I called it death by TV, because they put you in a room with about 25 other people.
Okay.
And you're all sitting in chairs around a room. They take you, I wasn't in a straitjacket, thank God. But they put you in a circle, and they put you in front of a TV because they have to watch you all the time. And basically, you sit there in front of a TV for like hours on end. They took everything that I owned and put my name on everything you own. There is something so demeaning about putting your name on your shirts, your underwear, your bottle of shampoo.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here. And it was Friday afternoon. I asked for a patient advocate. They delayed until it was 5:00, and there was no patient advocate. I demanded to see my psychiatrist. They wouldn't let me see the psychiatrist. I was too smart for my own good. Like, I knew the system, right? It was, oh God, it was so horrible. And the thing was, I was smart enough to know the system. I was smart enough to know what was going on. And I could see how horrible it could be for somebody who didn't know the system. Right? And I was making it miserable for everybody on the floor, on the seat, in the unit, because I knew that they really by rights should let me out of there.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be there, right? But they wouldn't let me out. And my own doctor had gotten me a message saying, we're trying to get you out. You can't. They won't let you out of the unit. And when you take a shower, when you pee, somebody has to stand in front of you.
Really?
Yeah, because they don't know if you're going to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And I was there, and there were people that had bandages on their arms that had just been let out of the hospital, right? There are people that are, just like you're in with such fragile, fragile people, right? And just feeling like, oh my God, like, it's like you really see what mental illness looks like when you're in a unit like that, right? Even in the locked unit, even the semi-locked unit I was at, it's like you realize so deeply what really, truly mental illness looks like, deep mental illness. When I was in the semi-locked unit, the first day I walked in, when I was there, there was an area that was a smoking area, and it was in a room that had all this ventilation. For some reason, I was in there. I don't smoke, but I was in there, and there was a woman talking to me. She was smoking a cigarette, and she just took the cigarette out and she put it out in her arm. And I
Just
thought,
casually.
just like me. And I thought to myself, this is what serious mental illness looks like. Like, it's like, that's what it looks like, and that's not me. And that's when I realized all the years of my life that I thought that I was so sick, and I thought the people in the little white coats were going to come to get me. That's not me. And I can't tell you, Neil, how profoundly important that was for me. And if there was anything I could say to anybody who thinks they're truly mentally ill like I did, you're not.
Yeah.
That's what mental illness looks like.
Yeah.
Like serious mental illness. What I was depressed. What I was anxious and depressed. It was like the day that I went on to anti-anxiety medications when I was in my mid-20s. And I took anti-anxiety medications, and that anxious thing in my stomach that was always churning went away. And I suddenly went, oh my God, like that's gone? Was this moment of like, oh, you mean it can go away? I don't have to live like that? Right? And that was that moment in the hospital when I saw that and I went, oh, that's not me. Right? So in some respects, that's why I say it was the best of times for me. And yet what was the worst of times is those guys coming down the hall and going like, I'm trapped. Like I can't get out of here.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the moment of like, the snake pit, the moment of the movie, like a movie.
But that also taught you something very profound.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? Or like the moment when they wouldn't let me have roommates anymore.
Yeah.
Because I was too smart for my own good on the unit. And then they stopped giving me roommates. And then one day I met so many amazing people. And they were mostly women. And on the eating, there were eating disorders on the units. And that was just so sad. These young women who were just not eating themselves to death, right? Women who had, they were 20 years old and they had coded multiple times. They damaged their hearts, their belly, their guts, all of this. They were, truly, truly on their way to death. One young woman in particular, the doctors had basically told her that it was very likely they were going to die, right?
Yeah.
And, sitting with them and talking to them, after mealtime, and they had to be watched after every meal because they would go throw up.
Yeah.
Right. And learning from them, just how much trauma they had in their lives. Right. And the young women in my unit of dissociative, and how many of them had been sexually assaulted for years by their fathers, their uncles, whatever. Right. And, one day they had a meeting with me and my doctor, my psychiatrist, and my social worker, and my, all the people. There was probably 5 of us and my husband at the time in a room. And I had watched all these young women on a unit who were, bright and interesting and all of this. And some of them had been in and out of hospitals multiple times. So they sat me down in this room and they looked at me and they said, Anna, you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life in and out of institutions. Or you can decide right now that you're never, ever going to do this again. That you're going to decide that you are going to live rather than spend the rest of your life in and out of institutions. So you need to make a decision right now. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I don't want to become those women. I don't want to become those people who basically gave up. I could see how somebody could decide this is easy. every meal is given to you. Your food is given to you. You get to go and work in the art department, and you get to go exercise.
You don't have to do all the hard work of pulling yourself.
No, insurance pays for it, And I sat there and I thought, I don't want to waste my life. I don't. And that's the moment I decided I wanted to live. And that's the moment I decided I didn't want to waste my life. And I left there, and even though I've had periods of depression, really bad periods, last year I had a really bad period of depression. Really bad, like the worst that I've had since then. That is the thing. That moment is the moment I come back to every time. I'm not going back in the hospital. I'm not. And that's the moment every so often with a patient, every so often I disclose that. With the right patient at the right moment, I disclose that moment for them.
How long did your depression phase last year? Yeah.
Was about 2 months, 3 months. And my partner was really scared. And we ended up talking to my doctor. We changed my medication. Was really disruptive to my work. My patient load went way down.
Yeah.
My work with my nonprofit really suffered. It's been a long road back.
Yeah. And did it sort of go away on its own, or
No, I had to change my medication. It was really scary, Neil, because I haven't had one that bad.
Yeah.
I had another bout about during COVID. I had a bout of it, which had a kind of a relationship. There was a relationship problem that I had that kind of set it off. The one last year, I don't know what, maybe I know a little bit about what happened. I think it had to do with, I had a employee, a disruption with an employee that really shook my. So
there are some triggers usually when like starts.
It's like, it has to do with like self-confidence. It has to do with moments where my self-confidence really takes a hit.
Yeah.
And I start to really seriously doubt myself. Right?
Yeah. Does it feel like you go back to a past version of yourself with lower self-esteem?
Yeah, I definitely think it has to do with self-esteem. I think it has to do with when I have moments of feeling helpless and hopeless is when it happens, right? And then I go back to feeling very worthless and hopeless, right? But those are moments where, it's like my psychiatrist explained something to me years ago. He said, life is like skating on thin ice. If you put enough on somebody's shoulder, the ice is going to break through. Medication is the thing that thickens the ice. So for me, my ice is like genetically, my ice is thin. And so medication helps thicken the ice. But if things hit enough on me, my ice is going to break.
Yeah.
So I have to just understand that, it's genetic for me. There's no question it's genetic for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, I just have moments where that ice is just too thin.
Yeah.
And when those things go on my back, it breaks through.
But it's not just genetic for you, right? Because it seems like there was some kind of early trauma that still shapes.
Yeah.
Shapes your.
Yeah. It's both environment and.
Yeah, and that's a big question. Is like, how do you tease the two apart when nature versus nurture?
Well, and I think some of it has to do with like neurology. It's like how much is your neurology shaped by your environment, right?
Yeah.
It's like in my nervous system, it's like how much has my nervous system been shaped by early trauma, right? So if you look at, and you're the one who knows more about neuroscience than I do, right? So if you look, we're very plastic. Our nervous system is quite plastic.
Yeah.
But if you look at how much, if you start with a nervous system that's in itself a little tenuous because of genetics, right? And then you put trauma on top of that, or you have repeated trauma on top of that. How much does that nervous system in itself get really wired in a way that is both somewhat weak, or the synapses are somewhat
And
disconnected?
these things, I think, often go in a loop. Like if you're already susceptible, then trauma happens and makes it even weak, and then it makes more trauma happen. It's like a kind of cycle.
Yeah. And if those synapses don't fire well, right? Or the connections aren't very strong, right? Or they misfire.
Yeah.
Right. And even I remember a psychiatrist talking to me about just that idea, like sometimes when you're taking medication too, and you change up medications and you're trying to strengthen those connections, right? Or doing something like ECT or TMS, where you're doing just little bits of electrical hits. Sometimes you're just trying to jolt the system enough that it's just going to try and rewire again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Psychedelics also.
and psychedelics too. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I struggled with last year, as to whether to do psychedelics last year. But the question was, which ones?
Oh, okay, yeah. The one time I took, I was in this prolonged phase of depression. I was just fucking tired of it. I was like, why am I still depressed? It's been months, And so I had heard that if you take like a heroic dose of shrooms, it will get you out of depression. So I took 5 gas, and crazy shit happened. And I got out of the depression I had. But not in the ways that I had imagined I would. Like I didn't understand why I got out of depression, but I did. But in the moment, it can be a scary experience. Probably will be. If you're kind of in a funk, and you were using something like mushrooms or something like that to get out, it's probably gonna be a hard, difficult trip before you do that. I don't think there's any way around it. There's like shit that you have to kind of go through. Yeah. But there are ways to kind of prepare yourself. Like, for example, I didn't know what I was exactly getting into. I didn't have a person to sit me. But I feel like, given my different experiences with psychedelics, a lot of the times I took psychedelics completely unguided. I went out in the outer space on my own, But given the experiences that I've had, I feel like it's totally possible for people to learn through first-person experience what it is like to take psychedelics and what kind of journey you're going to have, and shape and guide the journey of someone else, and avoid some like common pitfalls and things like that. They are really powerful. And I think part of the way that they wield their power is through making you face a lot of like scary things or whatever. But I mean, there's a lot of power in facing those with the right perspective that you kind of cultivate in advance. You don't have to be that unguided and strap yourself to a rocket and go out to outer space.
That's interesting. It's like, I've always wondered about that, because the idea that it feels so vulnerable to me.
Yeah.
And so I know for me that all the transformational work that I've done a lot of transformational work over many years.
Yeah.
I am generally in some sort of a transformational workshop or whatever, the person who breaks through very early. So I'm usually like one of the stars of transformational work. So if I'm in some sort of a weekend retreat or something like that, I'm one of the people that has I'm one of the big ones in the workshop.
Yeah.
So I am very vulnerable in those sorts of things. So when it comes to doing any kind of medicine work at all, I'm scared of that, because I know that I would probably be somebody who would have a lot of reaction to it.
Yeah, but that's good.
So, but then I'm worried about who do I do that with, where I can feel really vulnerable with. Right. And so then it's finding somebody to do that with who I could. So do I do that with somebody who I know? Right. Or do I do that with somebody I don't know?
Yeah.
Right. And then I also know that because of transformational work that I've done, I have done that with people I don't know, and have done that with people who are people who I have come to find out weren't necessarily the right kind of scary people, or people who have had big, there are a lot of people in the transformational world who are people who take advantage of people,
Yeah.
I've been through some of the big programs that have been around over the years, right? And many of whom have turned out to be not particularly great people,
Yeah.
right? And so I have asked people that I know really well about medicine work, some of whom have turned me down to do it with because they know me too well, right? So then finding people to do it with when I don't know them, I don't feel comfortable doing it with people that I don't know because I don't know who you are, right? And so I get mistrustful because there are so many spiritual bypassers that I've met, right? Who are really good for being like, oh, yeah, I know you. And then I'm like, I don't know whether you're a spiritual bypasser and I'm not that interested.
What is a spiritual
Those are
bypasser?
people, I mean, the term I've heard it used a lot, at least in the Bay Area, are people who bypass their own internal work by kind of doing spirit, like it's like, oh, I'm so enlightened
Oh,
and
yeah,
everything,
yeah.
but they really haven't done their own really internal work.
Yeah.
Do you know, does that make sense?
I kind of understand. There's like a sheen on top of it.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm a tantric person, but I really don't know jack shit about my own internal stuff.
Yeah.
Right? I don't really know that I'm actually a very narcissistic person who's doing this because it's all about my stuff.
Yeah, it's like a beautiful dress that they're wearing. Like, no one understands.
And I have no patience for those kinds of people,
Yeah.
right? Because actually you're as phony as the day is long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I've met quite a few of the Sony people in Austin also.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah, it just annoys the fuck out of me.
It's like the people who are tantric and think they know so much about sex.
Yeah.
I've met some of the most disembodied people in tantra than you could imagine, right? And so I'm a little wary.
Yeah.
So it's been like, and then I've tried to do some, years ago, I was very involved with a bunch of people, really amazing people, and they were all doing a lot of both ayahuasca and
DUT?
yeah. And they were doing a bunch of stuff, and they wouldn't let me go because it was a bunch of men who didn't want a woman in the group. And I was like, really, guys, you've known me for years.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we don't want female energy in the room. And I'm like,
Oh, why is that? Maybe they had something to work through that they were a little bit
I know, but
embarrassed about.
I appreciate it. But it was like after a couple of years of trying, like, could you just let me in, please?
Yeah.
They wouldn't let me in. So,
well, hopefully you keep like a strong radar and you like find someone in the future that you kind of feel like this would be a safe person to that do. Because psychedelics definitely have a lot of power here. Yeah. At some point, the mushrooms are going to take control. It's like, okay, here's you just sit in the passenger seat, don't freak out.
I did mushrooms once and I didn't get enough.
Yeah.
And I ended up having a really bad experience because I didn't have enough.
Oh, man.
And I was just incredibly uncomfortable and was really unhappy. And it was like, can we stop this now?
Were you nauseous?
I was just edgy, weird, unpleasant.
Yeah.
It felt like I was just like, can we stop this now? Can we stop this now? Can we stop this now?
How do you know that it was because you didn't take enough?
Because the friend of mine who gave them to me just ended up saying you were underdosed.
Okay. Well, even if you get like a good dose, it could still feel unpleasant.
Okay.
Yeah, you can never really tell what any particular trip is going to turn out, how it's going to turn out. Even like a proper dose can feel even more unpleasant than the other one. So you can't, the thing is with psychedelics, you can't really control what the experience is going to be like. But there are some things that you can kind of do, like you can kind of set your intentions and get in a sort of headspace before you do it. Take it in a place where, like the setting, like where you feel safe, you're not going to be out in public, and then there are a couple of like, kind of like rules of thumb that you can follow. But you can't ever really control exactly how the experience is going to go. but it seems like this experience that you had was just unpleasant and not profound in any way. But, you know, a lot of the times, the unpleasant experience that is going to happen is also going to be unpleasantly profound. And there's a transformational aspect of that. After you come down from it, you're like, okay, that was very unpleasant, but in a meaningful way that has left me changed. And this has happened to multiple times.
I can imagine that.
Yeah.
No, this was just like,
Yeah.
just icky and like,
Yeah.
I just like, blech. This
Yeah.
is not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just,
Yeah. So you said that you have had 27 therapists.
27 therapists.
27 therapists.
27
And like,
therapists.
I imagine that there have been like all of these were like different kinds of, you have sampled a variety of different styles of
Oh my
therapy.
God. Yeah. My very first therapist was a psychoanalyst.
Okay.
Hornian psychoanalyst, which means that was the second type of psychotherapy after Freud, was Hornian therapy. So this was like your classic, you know, you could lay on a couch sort of thing, even though I would not lay on a couch.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 21 years old
Yeah.
in New York City. He was Austrian.
Yeah. Wow.
He was with a beard. He was very classic. For 2.5 years. And I, in this New York City apartment, high-rise apartment, was very funny. I saw him for 2.5 years. I had great insurance. And I saw him for 2.5 years. He would fall asleep. He turned away, like he would sit in a chair with his back to me or side to me. Okay. And it was very weird. But at the same time, I was so frightened, and so no one ever had listened to me before. And I think that getting that kind of therapy as my very first therapy, even though it ended so badly, I think was really powerful for me at that time, because it was an opportunity for me just to talk and talk about, like, my insides, my insides coming out.
Yeah.
Like being able to just be in therapy where all he would say is, "That's very interesting," or "Tell me more." Like that classic psychoanalyst therapy was really, really helpful for me in learning how to learn to build insight.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the idea that he would fall asleep on me took such a hit to my self-esteem, you know? But on the other hand, as a therapist now, I can understand why it happens, you know? It's like that, you know, it's like you sit there for hours on end. Of course you're going to fall asleep, right? And he just doze off. I mean, stuff like that, right? But at the end of, finally at the end of therapy, what I found was that I would sometimes just walk away feeling worse about myself at times, because I was talking about lots of things that were really awful, growing up in my family, and my father was so controlling, and he called the psychiatrist and asked the psychiatrist what was happening. And my psychiatrist refused to tell him. Right. And my father felt like, well, I'm paying the bill. You should tell me. And the psychiatrist said to him, she's an adult, and they were so frightened of what I was going to say about them. Right. Yeah. And when I decided to stop seeing him, he said to me, "You're a very sick girl. I hope you get the help you need."
Yeah.
Which was devastating to me. Devastating. That just stuck with me for so long. I mean, it was just one more way that I thought that I was so sick, and that just set such an imprint on me for years after that. It was one more way that I thought the men in the little white coats were going to come get me, and I ended up seeing another psychotherapist, another psychoanalyst afterwards, but was not a physician. And that was a long unwinding of that for me in New York City after that. But yeah, I've seen that. I've seen kind of humanistic therapists. I've seen more behavioral therapists. I saw couples therapists. I saw social workers. I saw some therapists that were really ineffectual. I saw some therapists that were very engaged. I saw some therapists that were very. I don't think I ever had any more therapists that were quite as like not talking back to you as much as maybe my first two therapists were.
Yeah.
I saw some therapists that I ran out of the room. Basically, they were like horrible.
Yeah.
But I think that number of therapists really helped me see the different way that therapists can be.
Yeah.
And I think that it has really helped me be a better therapist, a much better therapist.
Yeah.
You know, when I hear that people have become therapists and have never been in therapy, I can't believe that. Like, how can you be a therapist and have never been in therapy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And in your own practice, you said that you're a sex therapist. What are the sort of like common issues and clients that you deal with, and what are your methods?
so, the kinds of things that I see. So even though in my nonprofit world, work in the area of kink, my practice, because I live in an area that's much more, I don't live and work in San Francisco, especially right now. I've had a practice in San Francisco before. Right now, I live in south of San Francisco by about 30 minutes. I'm in a much more residential area. So I see much more people who either are in the tech industry or people who work in other kinds of things that are in kind of much more suburban sort of areas.
Yeah.
I see individuals who work in tech. I see individuals who are in kind of adjacent sort of, fields. I work with couples. I work with individuals. I work with some individuals who are in relationships that are open. So I see people who are in consensual non-monogamous relationships. I occasionally see thruples or people who are in multiple relationships or they have multiple partners. A lot of my couples that I see are pretty traditional in their relationships. I see a lot of men, as I said earlier, which is a really cool thing that I see. And many of those men are single. I work with a lot of culturally diverse relationships. Like I'll have a couple where one partner is from somewhere out of the U.S. and born and raised somewhere outside of the U.S. I also see a lot of couples that are both from out of the U.S. originally and now live here in the States. And the kind of methods that I work, the kind of issues that people come up in with are, when I see couples, it's often desire discrepancy. So one partner wants sex more than the other partner does. I often see couples, particularly couples from Southeast Asia, who have never consummated their marriage. So they come in, they've been married either for a short time or a long time, well, like a few years, and they've literally never had sex. They don't know how.
Okay.
They
don't know how to have sex.
They don't know how. They don't know where their
body card goes where.
They know conceptually a little bit, or they don't actually know.
In India we have no sex ed. Like I don't think most of the time we don't have any sex ed in school, or like our parents don't do as a top. How are we making so many babies?
That's a really good question.
I kind of wish that more people didn't know how to have sex so that we could control the population a little bit. They're finding out somehow.
I often wonder about that myself. I mean, they come in and they go, well, we've been trying, but we don't know that anything is getting into any place.
Okay.
So I spend a lot of time teaching body parts. And they often are incredibly embarrassed.
That's so interesting that as a sex therapist, sometimes your job is like that of like a sex ed person. It's like,
I think people think that when it talks being a sex therapist, they actually don't know how much of what we do is psychoeducation. Right? And then I'm always surprised at how little resources are out there for us. Like, I want more videos of people actually having sex that isn't porn.
Yeah.
what we call patterning videos.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like actual real people having sex. I don't want to watch, I mean, porn is porn is entertainment, not education, right? I want real videos of real people having sex.
Yeah.
So that I can show people what it looks like for real people to have sex. Like, how does a penis go into a vagina? How does a penis go into an anus? Right? I want to be able to how do lesbians have sex? Right? Because people are really curious. They don't have a clue. And then what does somebody look like who actually has hair? Right? So many of the videos that are out there are people who don't have any hair on their bodies.
Yeah.
Right? And there are people who've never cut, they don't groom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it's like getting somebody who's never looked down there to look at their body parts. Right? I have clients who they're disgusted by their bodies because they've never had any relationship. They've never touched any part. I have clients who come in who've never masturbated in their lives. Right? Or they've never masturbated with their hands. They only masturbate with like a pillow. Not that I have any problem with the fact that somebody masturbates with a pillow. That's fine. But the idea here is what I call narrow scripts. So if somebody's only masturbated in one way, what they can create is what's called a narrow script, which is the only way they can do it. And the problem with that is then when you introduce a person and they've only masturbated with a pillow, and then somebody touches them, they go, oh, that doesn't feel good because the only way they've ever done it is with a pillow. Mm-hmm. So we have to open up the script. We've got to like add more things to the menu, right? And so what can happen is somebody touches them, they can't find pleasure in that, mm-hmm. right? And then they wonder why they can't achieve pleasure or they can't achieve orgasm because they've only been associated with a certain object or a certain kind of sex.
So in that case, what do you do? How do you widen the palette?
So what I do with them is I start to say, okay, we're going to try and masturbate in a different way. And I don't want you to think about achieving orgasm. Yeah. All I want you to do is think about, focus in on, does this feel good? I want you to just work on, like, can I just enjoy that?
Yeah. Yeah. So you try to take the pressure off.
The thing is, we get so focused on orgasm. Like, that's the thing we get focused on, is this achievement towards orgasm. And orgasm is lovely. Yeah. But when people only focus on orgasm, they're jumping to the cherry on the top of the ice cream soda. Yeah. Or the ice cream sundae. Yeah. It's like, that's the dessert. Yeah. There's a lot more on the menu. There's got to be appetizers and main courses. Yeah. Right? If you only focus on the ice cream sundae, you're missing all this other part of the menu. Yeah. Right? We want to give you a big menu to pull from so that when the ice cream comes at the end, great, enjoy that. Yeah. But like, let's talk about this rest of the menu.
Yeah,
but
even if it doesn't come, it's fine. It doesn't have to the end goal.
Right. And so you're going to be a better lover if you have a really big menu. Yeah. And I think sometimes when I can talk about it as most people want to be good lovers, see? So if I can talk about the idea of becoming a better lover, that can get really people engaged. Yeah. So if I can say to somebody, do you want to be a better lover? They'll be, yeah, I want to be a good lover, because that's like, oh, I want to be a good lover. So if I can start with that, and I can say, so part of that is learning how to be and like how to engage in foreplay. Yeah. Because I think some people be like, oh, foreplay. Like, why do I do that? Because you want to be a better lover. Yeah. Right? You want to bring you want to get their faces, and you want to hear those moans. You want to have somebody go, oh, that felt so good. Right? It's, achievement of orgasm that's just the cherry on the top. Right? You can be a great lover and never get to orgasm. You can bring them to ecstasy 1,000,000 times without bringing them to orgasm. So let's talk about what you can do with your fingers and your hands and your tongue and toys and all of these things. It has nothing to do with that. Yeah. Right? So what I do is I slow it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say to somebody, don't bring them. You want to tease them. You want to play. You want to do all these things, right? For men a lot, it's, the most common complaint of men is eager ejaculation. They come too fast.
Yeah.
So then it's like, slow it down,
Yeah.
right? Men are often concerned about how big they are, how hard they get, how fast they come, or how slow they come. So I just want to slow it down. They're often afraid then, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to get hard. Don't worry. Softer penises is fine. They have a lot to do. Can do a lot of different things. Right. But I'm trying to take the pressure off of guys. Because penises are very smart. It's true. They're very smart. When they're afraid, they go away.
Yeah.
Right? When they get excited, they come too fast.
Yeah.
If you're anxious,
Yeah.
it's going to go away.
Yeah.
So stop getting so anxious. Just let it relax. It'll be fine. If you're coming too fast, it's because you're anxious. And I can tell an anxious person, I can tell an anxious guy in 5 seconds. Because the minute he comes in and he goes, we got to fix it. And that will tell me right away they're anxious. And I'm like, so do you consider yourself pretty anxious? Oh my God, yeah, I'm really anxious. Well, there's a good reason why you're coming so fast. Yeah. Because you're anxious. So the first thing I would tell you is stop worrying about how fast you're coming. Yeah, but I'm coming too fast. We'll figure that out. Women come in and they can't orgasm. They're anxious. Because they're getting scared. Right? So they get scared and they tighten up.
Yeah.
Right. So, it's a lot of it is my being a good sleuth. Mm-hmm. Like I get I'm like Sherlock Holmes with people.
Yeah.
I want to know everything. I want to I ask lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. Yeah. It's like, how do you stand when you're doing that? How do you stand when you're having sex? How does your penis go there? Does it go there? I ask these really bizarre questions that they're like, why are you asking me all those questions? Because it matters. Like if you're standing when you're having sex, your penis goes a certain direction.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have an inverted cervix? Do you have, where is it? Like, how do you, what's your position? Do you have doggy style sex? I ask all kinds of weird questions. So my technique is, I'm very direct. I ask a lot of questions. Most sex therapists, sex therapy is a very, it's more directive than general therapy. I give people homework. I give people exercises to do at home. Some people do the exercises, some people don't. I draw a lot of pictures for people. I give people videos to watch. Sometimes people are coming in, they want quick fixes, and I have to disappoint them that things are not as quick. Sometimes the biggest issues in a relationship is a communication thing, that they're fighting so much. They can't have good sex because all they're doing is fighting all the time. Yeah. That there's so much disruption between them that they actually haven't created safety for each other. And first we have to create safety again. And I think that's sometimes disappointing for people because one of the two of them is, feels uncomfortable because they don't feel like the other person is just trying to push to it, and we've got to get back to a feeling of like calm.
Yeah.
Right. Did that answer your question?
Yes. I feel like I've kind of asked all of the questions that I had, and thanks a lot for.
You're welcome.
Yeah, sharing your spirit.
I hope.
I think you're doing really cool stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love what I do. It's pretty cool. It's always surprising. And where it goes from here, I don't know. It's like my practice has morphed a lot over the years. I'm always surprised by the types of people that end up in my practice. I think I never thought that I would have as many men as I have in my practice. I never thought I would have as much, as many multicultural people in my practice, which has surprised me and delighted me. What's interesting is this past year, with as many aliens as I've had in my practice, I started watching the Indian matchmaking program.
I've heard of this.
And I
Yes.
loved it.
You love-
But well, I'll tell you why. Because it wasn't about the sensationalism about it at all. What I found interesting was to watch all of the family and familial components of it and see the depth of family importance
Yeah.
and see the cross-cultural and also the families that were Americanized and the families that weren't, and then the British, and just like watching how the families were trying to navigate all of that. I just got a much deeper, and then the deeper appreciation of the differences between different states within India, and how, people wanted so much to stay within the state, within and not just because it was the state, but because of being able to share a dialect or being able to have the same holidays.
India is really kind of like a lot of mini countries.
Yeah.
It's kind
And
of
I
like the
didn't-
European Union.
I knew it, but I didn't know it to the extent that I did after, and that show really deepened my appreciation for that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now I understand why.
Not just dialect, like they're whole different languages.
Oh, whole
Yeah.
different languages, whole different customs.
Yeah.
The issue of diet, the issue of like so much, and I didn't realize it as much, but I do now, and it's helped me with and also educational, just like it's really helped me with, like, when I'm interviewing and talking to my couples when they come in, it's helping me understand, like, and also around arranged versus love matches versus, which I knew a lot more about several years ago. I already knew a lot more about that, but now I'm really understanding it even more. Right. And whether, like, now with the matchmaker thing, recognizing that what a big business that is, and how families are leaning more and more with that at times. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Do you believe now that this was also an interesting conversation?
Oh my God, I thought it was really fast. I think
Because you were like, oh, you interview all these interesting people, and I don't know how I could.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that you thought I was interesting enough to interview.
Yeah.
But it was cool to share.
Thank you for hanging out with Anna and me today in the Room of Lives. Take care until next time.